In aviation, we changed tremendously. But again, we're not smarter than medicine. We're not smarter than you guys. We just killed enough people. We had to figure some of this stuff out. We had to figure out how to take human failure, expect communications failure, and build a team to stop it. And here's why that's so important. I consider there are 3 tiers to a human safety system. And you're right in the middle of this. Tier 1 is what we already know how to do, to minimize the opportunity for human error, and system error for that matter. This is why we train. This is why we try to learn from other mistakes, ours and everybody else's. This is why we try to use forcing functions, and we use checklists and all that. But at the end of the day, at the wall of Tier 1, between that and Tier 2, what I call Tier 2, we're still going to have things roll across. We're still going to have latent errors in the system. We're going to have individual errors. And if you're sitting there waiting on the basis that the system couldn't produce any errors, then you have absolutely wired failure in. Don Berwick, many of you know Don Berwick, who was heading up CMS, Dr. Don Berwick, good friend of mine. I think that he came up with one of the most eloquent explanations about 8 or 9 years ago when he said that any human system, if built on the expectation of perpetual human perfection in terms of its performance, it has hardwired failure into its midst. Hardwired. So in other words, if we don't have a Tier 2, if we just have a Tier 1 and we expect perfection, we are always going to be surprised by the failures, and we are always going to hurt people, and we are always going to have problems. Tier 2 is where we have a collegial interactive team, and that team is standing there saying almost happily, you know what, we know we're still going to mess up. We're pretty good. But we know we're still going to mess up, and the system is going to mess up, and we are ready for it. One of our elements of pride is that we communicate so well that nothing is going to roll across that line. Well, there is no barrier to our speaking to anybody else on this team, regardless of how long somebody's been on the job, regardless of how uncommunicative somebody wants to be. There's a Tier 3, by the way, which is when everything else is working well, you've got a good team, and somebody speaks up and says, hey, excuse me, I'm worried about something. And the team turns around and doesn't say, when I want your opinion, I'll ask for it. They turn around and say, hey, we're in good shape. We know what we're doing. And then you've just cut off a 5% worry with a 95% almost hubris level of assurance. Never, this is a really important point, one I want you to take away. Never invest more than 50% expectation of success of anything you do clinically. Because if you're never over that line, and we had to learn this in aviation and nuclear power too, if you're never over that line, that if anybody voices a concern or even looks concerned, you're all over it. Because you know that the possibility exists that there could still be, despite everything else that's been done well, an error. So somebody speaks up and says, I'm not sure of something. The whole team stops and says, if you're not sure of it, we're not sure of it. What is it that's bothering you? That's very, very important.